So if one rule change wasn't enough, we now have two professional bass fishing leagues making changes to forward-facing sonar in 2025. We got Adam Deakin here as well as myself. We're going to talk about it. All right. So big changes coming, obviously, from head honcho Bassmaster. I think a lot of people were anticipating this. Deakin, kind of tell people what exactly is the synopsis of what's going on in the rule change for Bassmaster.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. We saw NPFL drop their rules from a technology standpoint. They're just going to stay away from forward facing as their ruling, right? Which I think is incredible for them and leads them into a position that is of strength to maybe a market that's not interested in that. I think Bassmasters, there's been a lot of speculation, right, in 2024. What are things going to look like in 2025? There's a technology committee. That is what Davey Height is referring to and talking about in both the news release and the video associated with this. But as a synopsis of a whole, I think it's a lot of the details that have been brought up and different things in relation to Bassmaster. But I think to start, just run through them. Basically, number one, only one live sonar transducer on the front of the boat. So only allowed to be mounted on the trolling motor, one live sonar transducer, and it has to be on a list of available live transducers. So interesting there to see what that kind of consists of. Secondly, basically limited to a total of 55 inches of screen on your boat, right? From the console all the way to the bow. That's your limitation on screen size. Third was basically one electric trolling motor, meaning just a foot controlled trolling motor. We've seen the advent of the crappie brakes and the trolling motors on the back of power poles and different things to control your boat in a different way. And so basically anglers aren't allowed to utilize that. And then the last thing that Bass released here is that they're going to focus on scheduling. I think that's super important. I really like this fourth one of basically we're going to try and diversify from a schedule standpoint. So that's the major points of the press release. And I'm curious to see. We're just seeing all this happen right now. I promise you, MLFs is coming. Like this is the time. Once one kind of drops, right? Rule changes. Everybody's like, oh, we got to get ours out there and talk about it.
Yeah, it seems that I wonder if there's any coordination on this between the leagues or if this is reactionary or just happenstance that they were within days apart. But we're going to break down each one of these quick for you guys and then kind of give our opinion. But one thing I want to put the asterisk on is Deakin and I are not on the Elite Series. We are not anglers competing. We are simply giving our point of view as fans and anglers that have used the technology. So we're going to try to put ourselves in both points of view of here for anglers for it, against it, that sort of thing, and break this down for you guys fully. But by no means are we trying to come at this as we're one of the elite anglers. I've seen that perspective thrown around there, and I just wanted to put that on the forefront before we dive into it. But the first one here in regards to having the transducer only on the front of the boat, and that is the point of for some people, if you may not understand, anglers were putting it on their jack plates on the back of the boat so that when you're idling, you're graphing, that way you can have forward facing sonar being shooting out left to right without having to get up and on the trolling motor. And Deakin, in your opinion, what do you think that this does now with that change anyway?
Yeah, I think it. I'm not going to say that it's completely widespread that everyone was doing that, right? I think you're seeing more and more guys in 2024 running that than ever before, and I think what you're seeing is an arms race, right? You were seeing an arms race. Well, if that guy has it, I have to have it, right? And realistically, you can get 95% of the way there, maybe 99% of the way there with one live scope transducer on the front of your trolling motor, in my opinion. So I think what that does is it just simplifies everything. You're not having these guys having to kind of do an arms race from a live transducer perspective on the sides of your boat. So basically using that as what would have been your side scan technology previously. In addition to, one other thought, Bailey, is just the handheld live scope deucer off the side while you're driving and idling, right? Like we started to see that kind of becoming commonplace. So not allowed to do that anymore. It's basically on the trolling motor. So that's I guess the changes and better way to, I guess, understand some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what that does with this from a fishing standpoint is it's going to force more guys either to they're either going to graph with a trolling motor down, or they're actually going to get up and onto the trolling motor in order to pan out certain areas. So it is going to take a little bit more time in that search process. But a great comment already made on social posts, we'll give him a nod here, is Lee Livesey mentioning no bass were caught at the console with forward facing. But I do think, out of fairness, at least from my perspective, it's going to take more time, at least in the search process during practice. But again, they still have the technology to go out and fish with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one, and I know we're trying to make this quick, but I think a turning point in my mind, and it's how I've learned to practice now. I don't have live transducers on the back of my boat. I think forward-facing sonar is the best picture you can get, regardless of what someone says with side scan and down scan. It's so good in a lot of ways. From a fish finding perspective, I fished as a non-boater in a Toyota series with Spencer Sheffield, one of the best out there when it comes to forward-facing, and he said, "Man, I end up picking up my trolling motor and scanning with that more than I do idling in every event that I fish around the country." And it changed my mindset on things. So I think more of that. Exactly. Like, yeah, you're gonna have to get up out of your chair, look on your trolling motor, get back down in practice.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and we'll come full circle around this. But let's get through these. So the second one being 55 inches. I'll be very curious to see what the process was in coming to this number. Why 55? And I think with this, I want to throw this over to you because you had a great point in regards to boat rigging. Like, what is the max screen size for one individual graph going to be? But I know you had some good
I think
ones to
there
call
is
the
one.
question on this.
Yeah, I wonder too. Like I always heard 60 inches was the rumor, which in my head, how you get to that number is you say 5 graphs times 12, right? So you go 12-inch screen. So two at the console, 3 up front. That was kind of where I thought the 60 inches. I like how they went below that. I do like how they went 55. So you kind of got to get strategic. So in some cases you could do some tens. I think boat rigging is going to get super unique here. I think you're going to see some guys that maybe run a 16-inch, 20-inch, some of these big 24-inch live scope units and be really dialed in with that and not care much about other stuff. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's my opinion on the trend is you may have guys running a single unit at the console, more at the front. So I think boat rigging is going to get super unique and technical because of this limitation. You can't just add 6 or 7 graphs to your boat and have all these little extra things, which I think is necessary. I think there's just such an arms race going on here that it's just making it. I mean, it's our bass fishing is crazy expensive to add additional things, but I think this is a safety thing, really, right? I mean, I don't know. You get in some of these boats, and when you have that big of a screen on the front of your boat, it is such a blind spot running down the lake, right? Like even on my boat, which just has two 12-inch graphs at the front, there are times with a trolling motor in the front and you go to turn or something and you're like, wow, I really can't see over this. And then if you have big graphs at the console as well, I think there's a safety concern there. I'm sure there's already been some insurance cases and boat crashes that had to do with not being able to 100% see. I mean, these boats go 70, 75 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if 55 really changes things though, because I guess it
Mm.
depends on if there is a max on one individual graph or not. Because if you think about it, at 55, that's you can still get away with two 15-inchers and then have two 12s at the console
Let's think about that. So what, the
because it's
24
two
plus
15s,
50?
30.
Yeah.
You get
Yeah,
25.
you could
So
run a no, yeah, exactly. I don't think it changes anything thing too much. I think what it changes is maybe the idea of having a huge 24-inch unit and then a 10-inch, whatever mapping unit and then something in the back. So it doesn't change much. I think what it does though is it stops guys from having maybe 3 graphs at the console, 3 graphs up front, 4 graphs. We've seen 4 graphs at the console this year,
yeah.
right? Especially
Yeah.
with some stuff. So like I think it still limits things, but I agree. Overall, it kind of stays on trend with honestly, I think this stays on trend with what most high level tournament anglers doing, regardless of if they're on the elite series or not, of like
Mhm.
having a couple of graphs, right? And having some stuff dialed in. So you're right. I don't think it changes a whole bunch. I think you're just limiting some of the height restrictions and stuff that it just starts to look ridiculous in my opinion.
We're gonna see 7-inch graphs come into play here.
Just a bunch of little baby
Yeah,
graphs
yeah.
bucking the trend, baby.
That's right. All right. So then thirdly, talking about the only one electronic motor, sorry, excuse me, electric motor mounted to the boat. So that is on the trend with the what is it, the crappie motors they call them that were on the
Crappie brakes.
your Raptors or power poles.
Mhm.
They're trying to get rid of that. I think we saw too after Toledo Bend, most of the guys, at least in the Elite Series, broke theirs anyways.
Dude,
They seemed like they were coming off flying everywhere.
I think, yeah, same deal, man. I mean, I think there's some total use case for it. I've never personally used one. I've seen them fished against a lot of guys that have them. They sure seem to be awesome from a lot of perspectives. I do think the long lining and like backing up as a fish is following you on live scope could be super helpful. And therefore, I think that that is a little bit of an advantage, or certainly an advantage for guys. But dude, I agree. Like, I just think about running through rough water and way where those are hung on the back of your boat, where your boat's taking most of the beating when you're in rough water and they're just hanging on your power poles, just flopping with all this extra weight, can't be good on things. So this one wasn't a big game changer for me, but if I was the owner of a crappie breaks electronics company, or or if that's what I did, I'd be kind of like, well, crap, this is annoying. That this was my
Yeah.
my business model. So
Well, they made hay this past year. That's
it's
for
true.
sure. There's a lot of guys you're going to see that on Facebook Marketplace. I feel like coming up soon of selling these puppies, because even the regional guys I saw using them. Yeah, and then we go back to the screen size too. I mean, NBT, you look at them too, and it's like, oh, that might put a damper at least on their business too. But
I think
again, we'll
any
have some questions
electronics
at the end of
dealer.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting. And lastly, the one that you made a point of that might be one of the more exciting points of these, but also from my perspective is I'm the most skeptical of is
Mm.
they talk about diverse schedule. And I feel like Bass has just been saying that for years. And that's just one for me where I'm not saying I doubt it. I'm just skeptical of it because I feel like I hear that every year. So I'll see that when the actual schedule comes out and we can always circle back. But when they say this from your perspective, what do you think they're trying to get at in regards to a quote unquote diverse schedule?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, right, is we see when live scope trends more so in the year and the type of fisheries that it's on. It can play everywhere. I think that's been proven. We've seen it in Florida. We've seen it in so many things. I do think that there are still bodies of water, Mississippi River, things like that, where you can try and push it more to where the winning patterns and or the majority of the top 10, I should say, are fishing, because that's our most camera time, are fishing in situations where live scope is not the main factor or the main player. And so hopefully, I agree, Bass is notorious for going back to the same places, and that's a money related thing, right? The same city, keep going back to, they build a relationship. Totally get that. Those are going to play. Ideally, if they can mix in some of the events that are set up in a time frame that are more of a shallow water fishery, a frogging, just things outside of live scope, I think you're going to have a better viewership. I certainly miss watching some of those events more and more as we kind of go down this road. And I'm a pro technology guy, just my take.
Yeah, I think that's something we should have specified from the beginning is not to go on the full rant of forward facing, but Deacon and I are both users, fans of the technology, but we also understand a perspective of not using it, putting it away, that sort of thing. So we're neither here for or against. We're just kind of stating the facts here, and then we'll kind of get into opinions at the end. But
Mhm.
man, in regards to this, going through these rules, I guess in regards to the overall change as a fan perspective, what's your point of view on this?
Oh, dang, like the entirety of it.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't wait to hear yours here too. I feel like this is riding the fence, and in a positive light, I mean that. So Bassmaster, in my opinion, is the front runner when it comes to tournament fishing things. I think when I look at this as a whole, as an industry, we look at like an NPFL, they're trying to gain market share. How do they gain market share? Doing things differently, right? Like by going no technology. Um, Bassmaster has to ride this fine line, in my opinion, because they really are supporting um, a lot of things in the industry, whether that be electronic sponsors, in addition to viewership and everything else. They really have to kind of take everything into account. So I think this was well thought through. I do think that they spent a lot of time, and with the electronics committee, coming up with kind of a solution that could be both sides, I guess, in a sense. And so I think that's what they did here, is they really are riding the fence on like, hey, we're not going to completely leave it wide open and have it be the Wild West, which I applaud. In addition to, we're still going to have innovation and see some of this technology, because it's the way the world is working. It's not just fishing, it's in hunting, it's in everything else. Like, you're seeing it, innovation, and limit it right at the pro level. So I overall I'm positive on this, I guess is my overall take is it's a positive riding the fence, but I don't think it's a hurting or crazy positive in either way. I think it's kind of riding the fence.
Yeah, and so to me, this one, here's what I want to preface this as. To me, this feels like, because I've already seen the polar opposites of people that are like, oh, this is the solution. This is going to be incredible. I've also
Mhm.
seen the people say this absolutely changes nothing, and they're already trashing it. I want to go into this with this feels like the day after Super Bowl, what they call the way too early season rankings is, I think that's literally what they call it, is the way too early rankings. This feels
Okay.
like that to me, in a sense of, I see the change. I see a what will potentially happen for next year. I don't want to go fall too far into an opinion just yet, because I want to see the product first, if that makes sense. Just like how you can't make legitimate rankings until you see the teams define it the following year. So for me, I kind of lean towards the side of, I don't think this is going to change much of anything. I think just with them having on their boat and how talented these guys are with the technology, I think there's still going to be a lot of guys that are going to be out there with the jig head minnow, the jerk bait, that sort of thing. I think it's going to make them a little bit less efficient in regards to practice and maybe cover a little less ground, which we'll see how that plays out. I can't really put again, we're not pro anglers, at least at that level where we can put a projection to that. But uh, to me, this doesn't seem like much. So the one that gets me excited is the potential for a new diverse schedule.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I feel like we're just simply going back 2 seasons ago, um, in regards to what the guys were using. So I like that
I
there's one
understand.
transducer. I mean, I hope we can see some more diversity in regards to what the people want. But I think from an angler perspective, if I'm trying to put myself best I can in the shoes of an elite angler, I don't think this changes much. It's just more of, now when you're on the trolling motor, you don't have perspective in addition to your just normal live scope or mega live active target, if that makes sense.
Right, right. I guess though, I mean, I totally agree. I don't think it really changes much from a
Mhm.
viewpoint competition standpoint. But what is it a positive move or a negative move in your eyes?
I don't know. I really don't. And again, like I would love to answer this a year from now, after we see how the season plays
Well, yeah,
out. But I think
that's not how it works, Bailey. That
I know,
we're
I know.
fishing personalities. You gotta make a judgment call now, and then we'll see how it plays out.
Right. Yeah. And that's what, I guess that's what I wanted to preface, though, is like, I can give an opinion here, but that might not be how it plays out. I don't want to look at this.
And it may
I look at
change.
this, right. I look at this optimistically. And
Mm,
same with the MPFL. I don't want to jump to positive or negative just yet, because I want to see how it plays out. But I will
mm,
say from this, I guess I don't look at it, and I don't look at it from a negative mindset. Like, it didn't annoy me or anything, or when the changes came out, and I wasn't overjoyed when I saw the changes come out. I guess uh, I'm more intrigued on, I just don't think much is going to change. I think the one thing I'm just curious, I will say I'm positive about, is the emphasis on the schedule.
mm.
While I'm still skeptic, I'm also hopefully a hopeful optimistic that there is going to be an intriguing schedule coming for next year for both the angler standpoint, but also the fans. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions just yet in regards to being negative or positive about it. I'm going to let that play out, but I just don't think much is going to change, because look, I know there's some people that didn't like the production last year, angler standpoint, but also from, at least from me being a fan, I did not enjoy last year. I enjoyed the hell
Right,
out of the
that's kind
production.
of my point.
We're both avids of the sport, but I think we're in that small bucket that will consume anything that's bass fishing content. Where I think a large group of, at least from a fan perspective, might not want to see a guy staring down at their graph all the time.
Mm.
Which, there's so many opinions flying around. We won't even get into that tangent, but I think we covered that pretty well. I'm curious what people's thoughts are. Put them down below. But we do have some other questions we want to bring up and raise about this that we don't have the answers of yet. We're waiting to come out, and of course, we'll cover in a future podcast, that you'll see on Business from the Bass Boat, as well as you'll see covered on Serious Angler. And you brought these up, Deacon. They're really well thought out. And it's, what does this mean to the opens? What does this mean to the lower level guys? Um, and so I guess for you, what would you like to see happen? Because there is, at least there's no facts out right now that we've seen in regards to it. Does this change the opens? Does it change the nation?
Mhm,
So what would
mhm.
you like to see?
Man, great question. I've always thought it's interesting, how in but it's you look at sports in general in the trend, right? It's like, okay, can't use a metal bat in baseball. at the highest level, right? But at the lower levels, you can. And I'm sure that trend continues in a lot of different sports and avenues of like the lower levels, you can do more things with technology than you can at the top tier. Um, I don't think it changes things too much. I don't think that like, let's put it this way, to your point of things staying the same, if you're a guy that makes the Elite Series and fishes the nine tournament gauntlet of the Opens EQs
Mhm.
and make it with a forward facing transducer on the side of your boat and or a big screen that's over 60 inches screen size and whatever it may be, like in my opinion, to your point, I think that guy probably would have made it with the same technology that is here and now, that is being allowed with this rule change. So I think that in itself is a huge point. But I would like things to be kind of streamlined down and through the entire league, just to make it kind of the same. But I also get the point of maybe if it's a full-time guide and they have access to additional technology that helps them in their fishing pursuits outside of tournament fishing, it may be nice to have those technologies for other reasons and different things that are outside of tournament fishing. So maybe that's part of it. But I would like it to be more streamlined. I don't see that necessarily happening. I think we've seen this with the Alabama rig, the utilization of allowing to use nets in tournaments, whereas on the Elite Series you can't at the lower levels at times. So I think that there's some questions there of what this looks like for Bass's grassroots leagues, right, coming up.
Yeah, I'm with you on
What
that.
would you
I
like to
can
see?
I completely agree with you in regards to those quote unquote minor leagues. Um, I I could see on the nation level allowing, as is right now. Um, but I can also see, and I guess from the open standpoint, I would like to see them play by the same rules as the elites. Go universal across the board. If that's going to be your training ground, the EQs for guys to make the elite series, then I feel like you should play by the same rules as the guys on the elite series. So from that standpoint, I would like to see the same thing. But from the nation, I guess I could go either way. If you're gonna try to make the same rule on the nation level, one, you're gonna have a harder time policing it. Two, then you're starting to, like, to your point, reach a different territory where you're talking about just the everyday guy that might be just jackpotting one here or there, people that may not have the resource or the time to go and make adjustments to their boat, which I think Bass would look at that and say that's less participation, less money in our pocket. So we're not going to try to limit that number. That's their largest group. I don't know. I could be completely wrong there, but at least that's what comes to mind for me.
I like it.
So,
I like it.
well, man, I'm trying to think. Is there anything we might have not covered on this one?
Yeah, I think the only thing is the takeaway here of like for some spidey sense, and I know this is about Bassmaster, but I'm thinking through of okay, this has all been talked about. Where is each league gonna kind of differentiate themselves? Feels like Bass is riding the fence. They're kind of the top dogs. You got NPFL doing their thing. What the heck is MLF gonna do? Um, Part of me thinks, man, with these two decisions, they're gonna leave it wide open. They're gonna let it ride. That's just my take. So that's kind of just something else, is like thinking through of like, what would you do from a branding perspective if the other leagues are doing this? Do you kind of maintain that mindset? And so then maybe you draw some of the young anglers that are super reliant and heavy on their electronics to go into you. I don't know. So curious to see
Yeah.
that release. I anticipate that coming this week or next week. Like I feel like when things like this break, everything breaks.
I think in the grand scheme of things, when we're looking at the production and the existence and advancement of live professional bass fishing entertainment, I would love to see, to your point, MLF keep it as is. And
Mm,
then now we have all
case
three
study.
scenarios going forward to look at. And this is selfishly as you and I, as a consumer of the sport and wanting to see the sport evolve and advance and obviously prosper. Um, we get to see three different productions. And so
Yep.
from there, I would love to see that happen next year. And then the leagues have something at least to ride on as, hey, we gave it a shot. We let each solution ride. And hopefully they have the humility to look at which one did best and be able to use that as the model going forward, if that makes sense. But I'm also a big fan of people having the choice to go watch what they want. And hopefully that'll limit some of the whining and
Complaining.
complaining that we've been hearing throughout the year. So Man, I feel like we did a great job covering this. Of course, we're gonna have way more information coming out in a future podcast of Biz from the Bass Boat as well as Serious Angler. Make sure you guys let us know down in the comments what you're thinking of this change. What, if you disagree or agree with us. Deakin and I are we can say we're mature adults. We're mature enough at least to talk about it civilly. But we're two adults here that can debate this topic, and we'll love to hear you guys have your stakes and opinions on it, and be happy to discuss in the comment section. But appreciate y'all. Like, subscribe. Make sure you guys tune in to the upcoming Business for the Bass Boat and Serious Angler episodes, and any further news that might come down the pipe on Forward Facing Sonar. Appreciate y'all for tuning in.